Having said that, let me go straight to the brief overview of my presentation. Most times when we talk about impact, especially in construction sector, I know a lot of us like to quickly just go to the project level impact, but I like to do my things in a particular way, look at the global scenario, then distill it down to the project level. Oh, just let us look at the current situation now. I don't need to talk so much about COVID. Everybody know what it is. It's a pandemic. That's a global outbreak of disease. And as of today, we have about 2.83 million cases worldwide, and about 1/3 of that population has recovered. That's 798,000. We have 198,000 dead globally. In Nigeria, we have slightly above 1,000 in cases. We have 208 recovery and 32 deaths. So businesses have shut down. We're being asked to work remotely and to observe social distances. Now, these things have impact on the economy, on businesses, and on projects. But I will look at the impact from 3 levels. I start impact, and then we now go to project specific. Why I have to do it this way is that, you see, we talk about projects, managing the impact of projects, but projects don't operate in a vacuum. They operate within an economy, and they are actually handled by businesses. Me and you, consultancy businesses, contracting outreach, they are the ones that run. So except we clearly understand what is the impact at a global level on the operating environment, and we're able to distill that to what does it mean for our businesses, and then what does it now mean for the project. I think if we do it that way, to give us clearer perspective. Now, on the operating environment, I just briefly highlight some, when I say operating context, because some people may ask, what is operating context in this case? It refers to the location in which a company carries out business or activity. Now, I don't want to say country level, global level, because I know we're from different countries. Some of us have businesses operate within our country alone. Some of us, we have our businesses operating at global scale. And apart from that, we are all prone to whatever happened in China, in US, and even in directly or indirectly affect us, because we have business relationships, supply chain issues, and the likes. So the current situation has far-reaching impact on global economy and the economy of each country. Yesterday, I was going through a document we're being told that this particular pandemic is going to push the world into the next recession. That will be the next worst recession after the Great Depression of 1919. So that means that the impact of this pandemic, what we could consider as a health crisis, we have an impact that is even greater than the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, where we have Lehman Brothers collapsed. And looking at the key indicators, there will be a decline in the volume of trade of the entire world by 11%. And then there will be a decrease in global productivity, global output in terms of GDP. There will be a contraction by 3%. Now you may look at that, 3% looks like a small figure, but when you put it in global context,
I wrote in, we can't hear you. Please, can you? Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now? When you put it in global context, 3% decline in global productivity is about $9 trillion US in terms of lost. So that's huge. That's humongous. And also, IMF also predicted that there will be reversal in capital flow because global investors, global global capitalists now, the providers of capital will now become more risk averse. You understand? The level of risk that they want to take now, they will calculate it based on, okay, is this place safe for us to invest in? So, and apart from that, they also predicted sharp drop in commodity prices. This one is no longer a prediction set. As at the beginning of this week, we saw the WTI crude. That is, has to be giving money to people that will provide storage for them to even buy it. So that's a very, that's a negative signal to the entire world, especially economy that operate based on revenues from commodity like Nigeria. Now, at enterprise level, that's at business level, what will be the impact? Now, there will be impact in terms of human capital. There'll be shortage of human capital because even after this pandemic, maybe some of the key skills that you need, they are in quarantine because they're infected. You've got to make an alternative provision for such. So businesses will suffer a shortage of labor. There'll be increased spending on health and safety and environment at enterprise level. That means at the company level now. Companies now have to be more cautious and have to be more concerned about health and safety issues. And also, there are threats to business continuity. Some businesses will shut down because, what used to be global, maybe brand loyalty and all those things will not be there again. Consumers are going to be extremely sensitive to cost. So they're most likely going to be looking for the cheaper alternative. They'll be rising do-it-yourself. So some business will face more like existential crisis. Some businesses may not continue after this pandemic. And then there'll be liquidity issue because of reduced access to credits to finance working capital, especially for contractors. Now, as a contractor, you are expected to maintain some level of working capital. So bankers now will be a bit reserved, they'll be more careful in giving out credit. So now let's go to project level impact. What are the impacts on projects? I don't know, it will make a lot of sense if you can see my screen now, I don't know. Now, on the project level,
I can see your screen, go ahead. I can see your screen, go ahead.
Okay, and it's correlating with this particular
yes.
place.
Yes.
Okay, so on the project level, what are the issues that we may have? We have suspension of performance. For instance, government in Nigeria, there's Quarantine Act that just declared that you should lock down some states completely. And so it means that people in that state cannot go to work. So there's suspension of performance due to no fault of contractor, due to no fault of even the clients. Then there will also be disruption in supply chain. And what do we mean by this? Like for some projects, some of the components that you want to use for those projects are not available locally. You're probably buying ties from Italy, for instance, in Nigeria, or you're buying from China. But then there's restriction on international travel, freights are shut down. So there are so many issues that one has to contend with here. So, and this will lead to delays and prolongation. And delays and prolongation, we're also most likely going to have loss and expenses incurred on both sides. Contractors will incur loss for reasons that are associated with disruption. Clients, maybe if the project you're doing, for instance, a restaurant now that is targeting a particular day to get to the market, and they're calculating what will be their sales or revenue from the day the project is launched. We talked about these key impacts. How do we address them? Now, in a bit to talk about the contractual implications of this, I consider using some standard forms of contract so that I don't just talk from my own understanding. Let's look at what some of the standard forms we use says. I considered JCT and FIDIC, but then I settled on FIDIC because FIDIC seems to be the most globally acceptable standard form of contract, and especially for multilateral development institutions, this is mostly what they use for their project. Now, when you look at FIDIC, both I looked at both the 1999 and the most recent version of it, which is now most people, when we're talking of disruption, suspension of performance due to this pandemic, the most reasonable clause that can come into people's mind is application of force majeure. Now, I need to also state it here that force majeure ought to have been captured in your contract for you to be able to benefit from maybe reliefs and compensation that comes from the force majeure. But then, also depending on the governing law, I'm going to be discussing strictly based on the provisions of FIDIC now. And why each person, the person from Kenya, we have to contextualize it depending on the governing law in Kenya. The person from China, we also have to look at that. But let's look at force majeure. And it describes it as exceptional event or circumstances which is beyond the party's control, which party could not reasonably have provided for before entering into the contract. So is this something you could have anticipated? And yes, let's even say you did not anticipate it. Is there something you could have done to avoid it? I don't think that the control of the pandemic falls within the purview of anybody in the industry and even globally. So in 2017, fashion of FIDIC, the term force majeure has been removed and is substituted with another term called exceptional events. And under that clause 19.1, 18.1 in 2017, it gives a definition of what can be referred to as force majeure. Though this list is non-exhaustive, but then these are more like what FIDIC consider to be force majeure: war, hostilities, rebellion, terrorism, riot, and maybe explosive material, radiation, and natural catastrophes such as earthquake, hurricane. Now, when you pay attention, if you pay attention to this, you will see that pandemic is not specifically mentioned in this. So now, this becomes a legal issue. Will pandemic be referred to as a force majeure? But then when you look at the definition, especially 19.1 A to D, this current COVID-19, you subject it to the 4 criteria. Is this something you could have prevented? You see that it is most likely going to pass as an exceptional event or force majeure, depending on the fashion of the contract that you're using. Now, when a situation like this occurs, which is maybe considered a force majeure, what is a contractor meant to do, or a builder? FIDIC make provision for giving of notice. FIDIC make provision for giving of notice. And it says that as soon as it becomes apparent to you that this force majeure is going to affect the progress of work, you are meant to give a notice before within 14 days. And then you shouldn't wait. It's best practice not to wait until this, maybe to say, oh, we're shutting down the economy. You've heard that they're discussing it. It's right that you just give notice. You don't wait until that restriction come into place before you give notice. Or the contractor in this case, to give after you've given the first notice, that of first notice under clause 18.1, you are expected to still be giving notice every 28 days. Okay, this is the situation now. Okay, the infection is rising. Okay, this is how it affects our operation. This is how it affects the project. So, and when the event of the force majeure cease, it is also the duty bound on the builder or the contractor in this case to notify the client that, okay, the event of the force majeure has ceased, and then we can now resume work. Now, what are the consequences when there is suspension, there's delay, there's prolongation, or there's disruption of supply chain in a case of force majeure? Now, when you look at 18.4a of FIDIC 2017, it gives room for extension of time. Extension of time without payment. Do you understand? But then, when you now go to, under that same clause, 18.4b now talks about extension of time with payment of the cost incurred by the contractor. Now, if the force majeure or the exceptional event falls under those descriptions that were given in paragraph A to E or of 18.1 or subclause paragraph 1 to 4 of 19.1 in case of 1999. So that means those non-exhaustive lists that we give, that was given by FIDIC, war, hostilities, government restriction, radiation issues. So if the force majeure activity that triggered the extension of time fall within any of those things, the contractor is legally or within the provisions of the contract, except you delete this clause, expected to be compensated for the cost that he has incurred because of this force majeure event. And also, another likely consequence of force majeure is that if it prolongs beyond a reasonable length of time, the contractor or the client can say, okay, now I want to terminate. Especially if you've studied the contract. For example, the client says that, oh, this is something that the contractor will be entitled to extension of time with payment. Will be entitled to extension of time with payment. Now, the client can look at it that I want to limit my loss. Can I just invoke the termination clause under the provisions of the contract? But that's only possible if the force majeure event has continued for a period of 84 days or for multiple periods that are more than 140 days in the life of the contract. So now, and I also need to say that you can only invoke termination clause from both sides if the force majeure affects substantially the progress of the entire work, not just some parts. Like for instance, now government has ordered all sites, all businesses in Nigeria to shut down. So that affects substantially the performance on the entire scope of work, not just on a certain portion. Now, like I've said, whether pandemic will qualify as force majeure or not now depends to the specific wording of your contract and then the governing law in your region. Do you understand? But I'm not saying this as a whole gloomy situation. I'm looking at from this now, what are the emerging opportunities? We've talked about the impact on projects. We've talked about provisions in the contract. But then there are opportunities that will be emerging from this pandemic. One is we'll see rise of ADR services, alternative dispute resolution, because after this pandemic, people will now have to be coming to the table and say, okay, so what can, this is my claim, this project was disrupted, this is how much I incur. The client will also be looking at that. No, you can't just put cost on my table. I also suffered loss due to the fact that this thing is not, this project is not cannot be delivered within the agreed schedule or timeline. So we see a lot of disputes rising. Some will lead to litigation, but as it's a practice in the industry, people like to explore alternative dispute resolution services. So we as construction cost experts will most likely come into place because there will be cases of having to determine the quantum of the loss or what needs to be compensated, or do we just do a mutual maybe discharge and then, or do we award extension of time? No, but each person bears their cost, depending on the peculiar situations in the contract. Because, for instance, when you look at what happened in Lagos, government alone could not have mustered the level of resources that is deployed to set up isolation centers, do massive awareness, do palliative. Now, we've seen the rise of public-private philanthropy in the case of what happened in Lagos now, because that's philanthropic, because there's no business interest. But now, after the pandemic, there'll be a need to spend a lot of money in healthcare infrastructure and also other infrastructure, because government resources is dwindling now. For instance, Nigeria government rely heavily on oil. So there'll be need to look into the private sector and provide a fund outside of the conventional mode to deliver infrastructure and to deliver services to people. So there'll be a rise of public-private partnership, and we may also be preparing to render services along that line. Also, insurance companies, we see, because people will now begin to appreciate insurance more, because people begin to see, oh, maybe I could have been protected if I've taken out insurance that has to do with pandemic. There are insurance policies for that. So, and then, so insurance companies will smile to bank, but then we may have a role to play, especially advising the loss adjusters and the insurance practitioners on some be the convention. We may need to reskill ourselves in cost management of service as an MIA intensive building, intelligent buildings, because we're going to be seeing the rise of it. Especially the elite in Nigeria, for instance. Sorry for people from other countries, and even in other countries too, they're seeing the need to more like, I just hope they have to provide state-of-the-art healthcare infrastructure, because this pandemic just shut everybody in, and then you're not able to even travel to those destinations of choice. So medical tourism is likely going to reduce, and that will mean more opportunity for us in terms of provision of cost management for healthcare. And another key opportunity is that digital transformation of practices and business. Now, a lot of us will now see reason to rely significantly on IT to lower our cost of operation. We'll see project meetings now being held virtually, because people will now look, if we can do it during this pandemic, why can we not do it at any other time? So there'll be opportunity for digital transformation, and this comes with lower cost of running business. Well, that's where we will end the presentation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ojelade Rotimi, for the